insane asylum. Mad, crazy, lunatic are some of the terms applied to people who have lost their mind. They used to be called God's fool. Medical idealists allege that it was the possession of a man's soul by vicious passions, and so to purge the soul, they tortured the body. So it was in the early 19th century. But even at that time, materialists said there was no such thing as a soul. They maintained that insanity was a disease of the brain. Ivan Sechenov, the founder of the Russian School of Physiology, and later the great scientist Ivan Pavlov, investigated the functions of the human brain and nervous system. They ascertained that all psychic activity stems from reflexes. This is an unconditioned reflex. During his lifetime, man also develops a great variety of conditioned reflexes. The reflex is a form of bond between the organism and its environment. This person is mentally healthy. Not only the prick of a needle, but even the sight of it stimulates a reflex. But how does the mentally deranged person react? The diseased brain does not respond to external irritation. The organism has lost contact with its environment. These psychic phenomena were first studied by Vladimir Bechterev, a progressive-minded man of science and a materialist. He made an enormous contribution to the science which deals with the structure and functions of the human brain. Bechterev applied the science of conditioned, or, as he called them, combination reflexes to the study and treatment of neuroses and psychoses. His pupils and followers on the staff of the Psycho-Neurological Institute, founded by Bechterev, are continuing the humanistic traditions of Russian medicine for promoting the health of the people. A new patient. Let's trace his destiny. We shall follow him into the Institute to see what the doctors and scientists are going to do to bring him back to sanity. A grave misfortune has befallen Valerian Kanichev. He has lost the power of understanding where he is and what happened to him. He is pursued by terrifying, monstrous images. Can sanity be restored to Kanichev and the other patients? I tear like a wolf at the throat of bureaucracy, down with routine and red tape. But look, those verses are not yours. They are. They are Mayakovsky's. But Mayakovsky has died long ago. Yes, but I wrote them in 1930. You're still living, aren't you? So how does Mayakovsky come in? I'll explain. He was my son. He also wrote poetry and used my pseudonym. He died for lyrical reasons. This patient imagines that he is in his country home. Are you a composer too? Yes. What have you written? I've written 10 Shostakovich symphonies. All of Shostakovich's symphonies are mine. Some of Prokofiev's compositions are mine too. Every mental illness has its causes associated with a patient's character, his upbringing, and the joys and sorrows he has gone through. It is necessary to know all this before beginning a treatment. It's better to get the story from the patient himself. Medicine now has means of temporarily restoring the patient's consciousness. Well, how do you feel? Where am I? In a hospital? Yes, you are not feeling well. Why were you silent? Why didn't you eat anything? They forbade me. Who is they? I don't know. They're not around anymore. Don't worry. Everything will be all right. We'll cure your illness. The talk with Panichev was the psychiatrist's first step. Later, he questioned the patient's parents and relations. Panichev's mother told the doctor that her son lived in Leningrad when he was 14 and suffered all the horrors of the blockade, hunger, cold and bombardment. He was shell-shocked. And before the war, was he an ailing child? Yes, he was a weak boy, easily susceptible to sickness. Could it have been the ailments of childhood that deranged Panichev's mind? Was that the cause of his hallucinations? Perhaps, but there may be other reasons. The patient's friend related the following incident. 2 years ago, when he and Valerian were returning together from work, a car coming round the corner almost overran a child. Valerian rushed to save it. He was in time to push the boy aside, but was knocked down by the car's fender. The psychiatrist is not the only person concerned with the well-being of each patient. The Institute's researchers and physicians and the laboratory staff help to identify the disease, detect the organic changes it has caused, and devise methods of treatment. It is not easy to make a diagnosis, nor is it easy to treat a mental disease, especially in its early stage. The patient views the doctor's actions as a threat to his life. Various remedies are applied in the institute. Panichev is medicated with aminozin. Epileptics are treated with a Bechterev compound in combination with other remedies. Insulin shock and other modern methods are applied to schizophrenics. The treatment goes on for weeks. Seldom does a mental disease abate suddenly. All of the Institute's departments pitch into the health-restoring effort. This department is for treating neurosis. Nina Yemelyanova suffers from hysterical paralysis of the right arm. The worst effect of every disease is moral depression, when the patient loses heart as well as hope of recovery. Bekhterev attached much importance to psychotherapy. The psychotherapist must find the source of the ailment, explain it, and restore the patient's good cheer and confidence in recovery. Do you know the cause of your paralysis? No. Is it nervous trouble? Yes, you've guessed right. But why should the nerves of a young woman like you be in disorder? What do you think? It's been with me that way before, since childhood. It's the consequence of wrong upbringing, of pampering. Coddling deranges the nervous system. You had always been guarded from trouble, and when it did come, your nerves capitulated. Rest assured that we will cure you. Today, we're going to start treating you by hypnotism. Your arm will be active again. Sleep. Your eyelids are heavy with drowsiness. They have closed, and you cannot open them. Sleep deeper. Now you are calm. Your arm is gaining strength. I will now lift it, and it will stay raised. Move your wrist. Power of motion is coming back. When you awake, your arm will function. Very good. You're on the road to recovery. Bekhterev developed the theory of hypnosis and applied it for the treatment of nervous and mental disorders. Sleep soundly. 1, 2, 3. Hypnosis is applied in the Institute today for individual and group treatment of alcoholism and other disease conditions. You now feel repugnance for vodka, for wine, and all other alcoholic beverages. You awake with an aversion to alcohol. Sleep sounder. After weeks of treatment, Nina Yemelyanova works almost as deftly as other patients. Since Bekterev's time, the doctors have been prescribing manual work as a potent therapeutical agency. Special workshops have been opened for this purpose. Valerian Panichev also continues his treatment here. Vladimir Bekhterev introduced a new branch of medicine, neurosurgery, for the treatment of nervous diseases by surgical operation. What brought this man to the neurosurgical clinic? The presumption that he has a brain tumor. Presumption, however, is not sufficient ground for venturing such a delicate operation. Modern instruments trace the curve of the brain's electric currents. Yes, there are electrical phenomena in the human brain. They were discovered and studied by Dr. Bekhterev back in the old days, when there were no such sensitive instruments. Present-day radio and television techniques afford an opportunity to probe into the brain. All doubts have now been dispelled. The findings have confirmed the diagnosis. An X-ray of the brain's blood vessels shows the exact location of the tumor. Now the surgeon can apply the scalpel. Neurosurgery has saved thousands of lives. The operation was successful. The vestiges of the tumor will be destroyed by X-rays. Here again is Nina Yemelyanova. She completes her course of treatment with radioactive valves and other physical methods. The physical methods applied at the Institute are based on Bechdev's ideas of treating nervous diseases by reflexotherapy. Fresh confirmation of Bechdev's ideas have been found in an ancient curative method of Chinese medicine. Treatment by needle pricks and cauterizing is another good remedy. And so, having completed our round of the Psycho-Neurological Institute, we shall leave it together with Panichev. The doctor reminds him that he should visit the neuropsychiatric dispensary. And one more reminder, Panichev should abstain from alcoholic drinks. Every day the departments of Institute send home people to whom the doctors and scientists have restored sanity and health. Vladimir Bechterev, the doctor, scientist and prominent public figure, was a man spelled with a capital letter. He lived and worked for the sake of restoring sanity to the insane, of promoting the health of mankind.
Moscow on a late afternoon in summer. City streets crowded with workers, businessmen, wives, and soldiers, anxious to be home, to meet with friends. The end of another working day in another city. But underlying the bustling activity is a quiet perseverance. A perseverance which might not understand, but which has learned to accept hardship. The knowledge that other nations enjoy higher standards of living is seldom remembered, and even to a stranger like myself seemed far distant. Russians have nothing to regularly remind them of the absence of luxury goods, of things they would like to have but can't, of what should be but isn't. During my summer travels in Russia, I found myself greeted with a warm curiosity, an easy hospitality. Chatting as best I could with people in the streets and visiting them in their homes, I found myself caught up in an aura of naturalness. There seemed to be a general lack of self-attentiveness, of a confining self-mindedness. The explanation of this attitude is not difficult. The Russians are simply too busy to think about themselves, and as a consequence, have lost the introspection which used to be considered a Russian characteristic. Mental illness in Russia is not a common topic of conversation. When asked about the comparative low incidence of mental disorders, they explain in a matter-of-fact manner that this can be attributed to their social equality. These two workers are standing in front of the walls of a psychiatric hospital. This hospital and others like it house 100,000 beds in Russia, not enough to meet the country's needs. The Soloviev Mental Hospital in Moscow has 600 beds. Mental care comes free, and only the seriously ill get treatment. Here, the Odessa Psychiatric Hospital devotes itself to the care of 1,000 inpatients. Outpatient clinics, such as the Odessa Psychoneurological Clinic, give by far the most care. They offer early diagnosis, help keep workers on their feet, and out of the hospital whenever possible. This is the Pavlov Psychiatric Hospital in Kiev. I have just entered the grounds without escort and without notifying anyone beforehand. The atmosphere is one of relaxation and informality. Patients are not required to wear uniforms, and if well enough, can stroll languidly in the afternoon sun. This woman is visited by her husband. Though not enough hospitals, those which do exist, like the Pavlov Hospital, have enough personnel. According to Dr. Babion, Chief of Psychiatry for the Soviet Union, there are 4,000 psychiatrists in the hospitals. Each psychiatrist averages a patient load of 28. At the Pavlov Hospital, these psychiatrists average 20 patients each. The most surprising statistic is that over 3/4 of the doctors are women. A warm personal interest is shown by these lady physicians toward their patients. I would say a woman's touch. In addition to psychiatrists, there are 320 psychiatric nurses to care for 1,000 patients at this hospital. In the average Russian mental hospital, each nurse takes care of 6 patients. A fully qualified nurse must complete 3 years of special training after high school. Adequate numbers of personnel, tranquilizers, and sedatives make straitjackets unnecessary, and in fact illegal in the Soviet Union. The Russians have a long history of humane treatment for mental patients, a custom which started long before the Bolshevik Revolution. I think that every hospital administrator the world over has a pet project he wants to see completed. Here, the objective was to replace the bars on wards housing the violently disturbed with unbreakable glass windows. This gregarious individual is diagnosed manic depressive. Russians use the same diagnostic labels as we do, and as we do, they consider each patient an individual case. The familiar wringing of hands points up this woman's anxiety syndrome. But what has made the patients anxious? Conflict with the factory supervisor, fear of police, crowded living conditions at home? These and other reasons became apparent during my conversations with patients. However, I soon discovered that Pavlovian theory, which dominates Russian psychiatry, does not emphasize social causes as the source of mental disturbance. With this in mind, I journeyed to the Soloviev Mental Hospital and Clinic in Moscow to see how psychiatrists actually diagnose and treat patients. Here at the clinic, these children were waiting for news of their brother in the next room. He's receiving a neurological examination. If the problem is deeply psychological, the why behind the disorder is not brought to the surface, not measured by psychological tests, not analyzed by Freudian theory. A psychiatrist at Soloviev told me, "You Americans are more on theory than we." The doctor traditionally begins treatment with a complete write-up of the medical examination and case history. For an alcoholic, some psychotherapy and sedatives, but not the analyst's couch. For an epileptic, the same drugs as used in America. Hospital records show that epileptics make up 8 or 9% of the hospital population. A schizophrenic receives sleep therapy and insulin shock. Electric shock is officially regarded as a brutal form of therapy, and therefore is used infrequently. Patients diagnosed schizophrenic comprise 25% of the country's total hospital population. A victim of syphilis has arrived for treatment. Arsenic compounds will be used instead of penicillin, which is still hard to get in sufficient quantities. Patients with syphilis of the brain comprise about 2% of the Moscow hospital population. According to the Russians, in all of the Soviet hospitals, the rate of recovery averages 92.7% of arrivals and 61% of combined arrivals and residual patients. And these percentages refer to those patients who are considered recovered enough to leave by the end of the year. As you can see, syphilis carries the same social stigma in Russia as in the U.S. These fifth-year students of psychiatry told me how they were trained to be psychiatrists. After high school, they received a medical education of 6 years and are taught almost exclusively Pavlovian theory. In Russia, the emphasis is on neuropsychiatry. The scientific study of inter- and intrapersonal relationships is definitely played down in importance. Basic Pavlovian theory, as used by the Russians, relates not primarily to behavior or environment or mind, but to the brain. Students rely, therefore, heavily on drugs and on a Russian specialty called sleep therapy. Dr. Shavanova, only 25 years old, has placed electrodes over the eyelids of the patient and set the control to 10 or 15 milliamperes. She will maintain the sleep for 1 hour. Electric sleep rather than shock is commonly used for depressive patients. Work therapy and supportive therapy go together. The Russians feel that useful activities develop wholesome social attitudes, attitudes which psychiatrists analyze by what they call common sense, not the psychological tests or Freudian analysis. Freud supposedly overemphasized the role of sex and instinct, officially branded in Soviet Russia as philosophical idealism. The psychiatrist listens sympathetically to the patient's problems and then prescribes medical treatment or advice for her to follow. The basic aim in treating her is to restore the patient to good health and to the community. Russians do not strive to get the patient to understand his whole mental life, to gain deep insight and understanding. They appear satisfied to get the patient back on his feet. There is no doubt that Dr. Kasaya is effective and sympathetic as a doctor with a heart. But one cannot help wondering whether or not training in depth psychiatry would make her still more effective. Psychiatrists can get most patients back on their feet through chemotherapy. But what about the actual roots of the disturbance? Dr. Kasaya keeps children active at play. Her children's ward has 25 patients, serious cases involving epilepsy, brain tumor, and brain damage at birth. For these emotionally disturbed children, life is kept as normal as possible. Here we see a class in biology being conducted in the hospital itself. The Soloviev Mental Hospital and Clinic marks the end of a 3-month tour in Russia. As a parting gesture, Dr. Nebyevich invited me to visit her little boy, Sasha, whom she calls for at his nursery at the end of each day. It struck me that the motherly affection she shows Sasha is the same basic interest and concern that she and others like her have shown their patients at the various hospitals I visited during the summer. Although there is a basic dissimilarity between Pavlovian theory and the concepts of Freud, which has had widespread influence in the West, Russian psychiatrists, even though they function in a different ideological sphere, have one thing in common with doctors all over the world. They want their patients to get well as quickly as possible. To restore them once again to the society they live in.
Insane asylum. Mad, crazy, lunatic are some of the terms applied to people who have lost their mind. They used to be called God's fool. Medical idealists allege that it was the possession of a man's soul by vicious passions, and so to purge the soul, they tortured the body. So it was in the early 19th century. But even at that time, materialists said there was no such thing as a soul. They may follow him into the institute to see what the doctors and scientists are going to do to bring him back to sanity. A grave misfortune has befallen Valerian Panichev. He has lost the power of understanding where he is and what happened to him. He is pursued by terrifying, monstrous images. Can sanity be restored to Panichev and the other patients? I tear like a wolf at the throat of bureaucracy, down with routine and red tape. But look, those verses are not yours. They are. They are Mayakovsky's. But Mayakovsky has died long ago. Yes, but I wrote them in 1930. You're still living, aren't you? So how does Mayakovsky come in? I'll explain. He was my son. He also wrote poetry and used my pseudonym. He died for lyrical reasons. This patient imagines that he is in his country home. Are you a composer too? Yes. What have you written? Maintains that insanity was a disease of the brain. Ivan Sechenov, the founder of the Russian School of Physiology, and later the great scientist Ivan Pavlov, investigated the functions of the human brain and nervous system. They ascertained that all psychic activity stems from reflexes. This is an unconditioned reflex. During his lifetime, man also develops a great variety of conditioned reflexes. The reflex is a form of bond between the organism and its environment. This person is mentally healthy. Not only the prick of a needle, but even the sight of it stimulates a reflex. But how does the mentally deranged person react? The diseased brain does not respond to external irritation. The organism has lost contact with its environment. These psychic phenomena were first studied by Vladimir Bechterev, a progressive-minded man of science and a materialist. He made an enormous contribution to the science which deals with the structure and functions of the human brain. Bechterev applied the science of conditioned, or, as he called them, combination reflexes to the study and treatment of neuroses and psychoses. His pupils and followers on the staff of the Psycho-Neurological Institute, founded by Bechterev, are continuing the humanistic traditions of Russian medicine for promoting the health of the people. A new patient. Let's trace his destiny.